He ruled with an iron fist, turned peasants into soldiers, and forged a shattered empire into a global superpower. But at what cost? Was Joseph Stalin a strategic genius who modernized Russia and crushed the Nazis, or a ruthless tyrant who murdered millions of his own people? The truth lies somewhere between brilliance and brutality. Today, we dive deep into the chilling legacy of one of history's most controversial figures and ask the question: Stalin, monster or mastermind? Born in 1878 in the Georgian town of Gori, Joseph Jugashvili, who would later become Joseph Stalin, grew up in poverty under the shadow of an abusive, alcoholic father and a deeply religious mother. As a child, he was frail and often ill, but also intelligent and fiercely ambitious. He trained for the priesthood but soon abandoned religion for the fires of revolution. Drawn to Marxist ideology, Stalin joined underground revolutionary circles, carrying out robberies, organizing strikes, and enduring arrests and Siberian exile. He wasn't charismatic like Trotsky or visionary like Lenin, but Stalin had something they didn't: patience, calculation, and an unrelenting thirst for power. When Lenin died in 1924, a power struggle erupted within the Communist Party. Stalin played his cards with icy precision, portraying himself as Lenin's humble successor, while quietly maneuvering against his rivals. Trotsky, once the hero of the revolution, was outmaneuvered, exiled, and eventually assassinated. By 1928, Stalin had seized complete control. The revolution was over. The regime had begun. Stalin believed the Soviet Union was decades behind the West, and that catching up was a matter of survival. "We are 50 or 100 years behind the advanced countries," he declared. "We must make good this lag in 10 years. Either we do it, or we shall be crushed." Thus began the first 5-year plan, launched in 1928, a monumental effort to transform the USSR from a rural backwater into an industrial juggernaut. New factories sprang up almost overnight. Railroads, dams, steel mills, and power plants were built at breakneck speed. Illiteracy plummeted as education expanded, and propaganda painted Stalin as the architect of Soviet progress. But this progress came with a terrible price. To feed the growing cities and workforce, Stalin forced millions of peasants into collective farms, stripping them of land, livestock, and autonomy. When they resisted, he responded with unflinching cruelty. Grain was requisitioned at gunpoint, often leaving villages to starve. In Ukraine, the result was catastrophic. Between 1932 and 1933, a man-made famine known as the Holodomor killed an estimated 3 to 5 million people. Entire families perished, fields went barren, and neighbors turned on each other in desperation. Stalin denied the famine's existence, even as millions wasted away. Even as death swept the countryside, Stalin grew increasingly paranoid. He saw enemies everywhere, real or imagined, and decided to eliminate them all. From 1936 to 1938, the Great Purge decimated Soviet society. The NKVD, Stalin's secret police, arrested artists, generals, scientists, and loyal party members. People were forced to confess to absurd crimes under torture. Show trials turned justice into theater. Execution lists were signed in batches, sometimes hundreds at a time. Over 1 million were killed. Millions more were sent to Gulags, labor camps in the icy wilderness of Siberia where few survived. The purges reached absurd levels. Even Stalin's closest allies lived in fear, knowing a misplaced word or a suspicious glance could mean death. Then in 1939, Stalin shocked the world by signing a non-aggression pact with Adolf Hitler. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact carved up Eastern Europe between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. Stalin invaded Poland from the east, while Hitler marched in from the west. The Red Army also occupied the Baltic states and attacked Finland. But in June 1941, Hitler broke the pact. Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history, smashed into Soviet territory. Stalin, caught off guard, reportedly retreated into a stunned silence for days. But when he re-emerged, he rallied the nation with a fiery will. Factories were dismantled and relocated beyond the Ural Mountains. Millions of men were conscripted into the Red Army. Stalin enforced a scorched earth policy. As the Nazis advanced, Soviet forces destroyed everything in their path. No resources were to fall into German hands. The war was brutal. Cities like Leningrad and Stalingrad became hellscapes of fire and famine. But the Soviet Union held. The Battle of Stalingrad marked a turning point. Against impossible odds, Soviet forces encircled and defeated the German Sixth Army. By 1945, the Red Army was in Berlin. Hitler was dead. Nazism was crushed. To many, Stalin had become a savior, a man who had industrialized the USSR and defeated fascism. But beneath the victory was a holocaust. Tens of millions dead, cities in ruins, a society scarred. And yet Stalin's appetite for control didn't end with the war. In the aftermath, he tightened his grip on Eastern Europe, installing communist puppet regimes across the region. Dissent was crushed, borders closed. The Iron Curtain fell, dividing the world into East and West. Inside the USSR, Stalin resumed his purges. Jewish intellectuals, returning soldiers, and even top war heroes were accused of espionage and executed or exiled. Anti-Semitic campaigns ramped up. The paranoia intensified. Propaganda filled every corner of Soviet life, and the people learned to whisper, to look over their shoulders, and to never trust too easily. The Cold War had begun, an ideological nuclear standoff between Stalin's USSR and the capitalist West. On March 5, 1953, Joseph Stalin died suddenly of a stroke, or perhaps was quietly poisoned by those closest to him. His death sent shockwaves through the nation. Millions mourned, lining up for days to see his body. But as the years passed, the myth unraveled. In 1956, Stalin's successor Nikita Khrushchev delivered a secret speech to the Communist Party, denouncing Stalin's crimes, his purges, and his cult of personality. It was the beginning of a slow reckoning. So, how do we remember Stalin today? As a mastermind who turned Russia into a superpower and defeated Nazi Germany? Or as a monster who crushed freedom, engineered mass starvation, and drowned his own people in fear and blood? The truth is both. Stalin's genius lay in his ability to see the big picture and force it into existence, no matter the human cost. He took a backward feudal empire and made it into an industrial and military powerhouse. He played the geopolitical game better than most, but he also created a culture of terror that stifled innovation, destroyed lives, and left scars across generations. He once said, "A single death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic, but behind every statistic was a child, a mother, a father, a dream, a voice silenced." Stalin changed the course of history, but not through vision or compassion, through brutality. He was both monster and mastermind, a man who shaped the 20th century, not with wisdom but with fear. And that is the terrifying paradox of power. Sometimes the most effective leaders are also the most dangerous.